There are moments in life when you don't need another sermon. You don't need someone standing in front of you telling you to try harder. And you definitely don't need to hear familiar phrases like, "everything will work out," repeated without understanding the weight you're carrying. Because when debt surrounds you, when numbers quietly grow in the background, when every phone notification tightens your chest, empty encouragement only makes the exhaustion deeper. And maybe that's why you're here right now. Not because you're looking for a shortcut, not because you're chasing a miracle that drops money into your hands overnight, but because you're searching for something real, something steady enough to hold on to when everything feels unstable. In the book of Psalms, there is a passage like that. It doesn't shout. It doesn't promise instant wealth. It doesn't pretend that faith erases responsibility. Yet it carries a quiet power, the power to break unseen barriers and to open a path toward true prosperity, not just financially, but inwardly. This psalm was never meant for people who simply want to get rich. It was written for those who are tired, for those who have been carrying silent pressure for too long, for those who feel trapped between hope and shame, prayer and disappointment. Before you listen any further, there are two questions worth asking, not to challenge you, but to invite honesty. Are you truly ready for change? Not just a change in circumstances, but a change in how you see money, responsibility, and yourself. And the second question, perhaps the harder one, are you prepared to handle abundance if it comes? It may sound strange, but many people pray for prosperity without ever preparing for it. They want freedom from debt, but they're not ready to let go of old habits. They want financial breakthrough, yet deep down, they believe they don't deserve it. This psalm does not comfort those illusions. It gently confronts them. If you are in debt, if you have been praying for a long time without seeing visible change, if you are tired of appearing strong while quietly falling apart inside, this is not a message that promises magic. It is a message that offers something more demanding and far more real. An invitation to stay, to listen, and to begin again, differently. From the very beginning, one truth must be made clear, even if it feels uncomfortable. This psalm is not a wealth spell. It is not a formula you repeat until money appears. It is not a spiritual lottery ticket. And if it is approached with the wrong mindset, it won't help at all. In fact, it may deepen frustration. Many people turn to faith when they are exhausted. That is natural, but problems begin when faith is treated as a tool for greed rather than transformation. When the psalm is read with thoughts like, "I need money and I need it now. If I pray hard enough, God must give me what I want." At that point, prayer turns into a transaction. Faith becomes a demand. That is why so many people pray for years and feel nothing but silence. Not because the psalm has no power, but because it is being approached from the wrong place. Faith was never designed to serve greed. It was never meant to help people avoid responsibility. And it was never intended to be a shortcut to wealth without inner change. The unspoken message of this psalm is clear. Faith does not exist to determine how much money you have. Faith exists to shape who you become, with or without money. If you read this psalm hoping for a sudden escape, you may miss its greatest gift, inner transformation. And transformation is never rushed. Lasting prosperity is never built on fear, comparison, or desperation. This psalm does not oppose wealth. but it is uncompromising when it comes to motivation. It does not ask, how much do you want? It asks, who will you be when it comes, and who are you now without it? Only when you are willing to face that question, honestly does the psalm begin to open, not as a miracle, but as a path. Debt is often described in numbers, balances, deadlines, interest rates. But long before it becomes a financial problem, debt becomes something else entirely. It becomes a weight, not always sharp, not always dramatic, just heavy enough to follow you into every quiet moment. Debt is the reason your mind doesn't fully rest at night. It's the background noise behind conversations. It's the tension you feel when planning the future, because every plan must first pass through the question, can I afford this? But the deepest damage of debt is not economic, it is emotional and even spiritual. Debt has a way of slowly reshaping how you see yourself. It whispers that you've failed, that you're irresponsible, that you're behind in life, and eventually it does something even more dangerous. It convinces you that you are alone. Many people in debt stop praying, honestly, not because they don't believe anymore, but because shame makes prayer feel awkward. They still pray, but cautiously, quickly, without expectation. Some begin to believe that God has gone silent. Others quietly assume they are being punished, but the psalm speaks into this exact space. It does not define debt as a punishment. It does not shame the one who is struggling. Instead, it reveals something most people never consider. Debt is not only about money, it is about orientation. It reflects where fear has taken control, where pressure has replaced peace, where survival thinking has crowded out wisdom. This is why debt feels so suffocating. It doesn't just limit your spending, it narrows your thinking. You begin making decisions from urgency instead of clarity, from fear instead of discernment, from desperation instead of trust. The psalm does not deny the reality of debt, but it refuses to let debt define your worth. It gently separates who you are from what you owe. And that separation matters more than most people realize. Because until you stop seeing yourself as a person in debt, you cannot begin to see yourself as a person capable of rebuilding. The psalm restores that distinction, not by removing the burden instantly, but by lifting the crushing belief that your current state is your final identity. Many people approach Scripture as a tool, something to use, something to activate. They ask, what can this do for me? How do I apply this to get results? But this psalm resists that approach. It does not function like a key that unlocks money. It functions like a mirror. And mirrors can be uncomfortable, because instead of changing your circumstances, they show you what has been shaping them. When you read this psalm slowly, without demanding outcomes, it begins to reveal patterns. Not accusations, patterns. Patterns of avoidance. Patterns of fear-based decisions. Patterns of ignoring wisdom because urgency felt louder. The psalm does not condemn these patterns, it illuminates them. And illumination is the first step toward change. This is why the psalm does not promise instant relief. Instant relief would leave the deeper structure untouched. Instead, it invites alignment between belief and behavior, between prayer and practice, between trust and discipline. The psalm asks uncomfortable questions without speaking them out loud. Do you trust provision more than appearance? Do you seek peace, or do you chase relief? Do you want freedom, or just escape? These questions are not meant to accuse. They are meant to slow you down, because clarity rarely comes to those who are rushing to be rescued. The psalm reframes prosperity itself, not as excess, not as status, but as stability, peace, and direction. It suggests that true wealth begins when your inner world stops being governed by panic, when you are no longer making decisions just to survive the moment. This is why the psalm does not bypass responsibility, it strengthens it. It steadies the heart so the mind can think clearly again. It restores calm so wisdom can be heard. And from that place, change becomes possible, not dramatic, but durable. The psalm is not impressed by sudden breakthroughs. It honors consistency, small corrections, repeated choices, faith expressed through restraint, patience, and obedience. Read this way, the psalm becomes less about asking for money and more about becoming someone capable of stewarding provision. Not someday, but now. And that shift, quiet, internal, often unnoticed by others, is where true rebuilding begins. Most people believe they know what prosperity is. They imagine relief, freedom from pressure, a life where money no longer dictates every decision. But the psalm challenges that assumption, not by rejecting prosperity, but by redefining it. In Scripture, prosperity is never described as excess without purpose. It is not measured by how much you accumulate, but by how steadily your life is sustained. True prosperity is not loud, it does not rush, it does not demand attention. It shows itself in quiet stability, in the ability to breathe without panic, in choices made without fear of tomorrow, in peace that does not collapse when circumstances shift. This is why the psalm does not ask you to desire more. It asks you to desire alignment. Alignment between what you ask for and what you are prepared to manage. Alignment between your values and your financial behavior. Alignment between trust and discipline. Many people want prosperity because they believe it will remove anxiety. But anxiety does not disappear simply because money arrives. If fear governs the heart, fear will govern wealth as well. The psalm speaks to this truth quietly but firmly. It suggests that abundance without wisdom becomes another form of bondage. That increase without restraint leads to instability. That provision without purpose eventually creates emptiness. So the psalm reshapes the question, not, how can I become rich? But, what kind of person must I become to live well with provision? This is where transformation begins, when prosperity is no longer seen as escape, but as responsibility. When money becomes a resource to steward, not a solution to identity. The psalm does not promise sudden expansion, it promises rootedness. And rootedness, once established, supports growth naturally. One of the most dangerous misunderstandings about faith is the belief that it replaces action. That if you pray enough, clarity will arrive without effort. That if you trust deeply enough, responsibility can be delayed. The psalm does not support this idea. Instead, it presents faith as something that activates movement. Not hurried movement, not frantic reaction, but deliberate, grounded action. Faith, as revealed here, is not passive hope. It is courage expressed through choices. The psalm calms the inner noise so that wisdom can be heard again, because fear distorts decision-making. It narrows perspective. It prioritizes relief over truth. But when fear quiets, clarity returns. From that place, faith begins to move. It moves you to look honestly at your finances, without denial or shame. It moves you to name habits that no longer serve you. It moves you to seek counsel instead of hiding in isolation. These movements are not dramatic. They do not feel spiritual in the way people expect. Yet they are the truest expression of faith. Faith does not eliminate effort. It gives effort direction. The psalm never suggests that prayer alone pays debts. It suggests that prayer steadies the heart so that wise action becomes possible. Small actions, consistent actions, often uncomfortable actions, budgeting instead of avoiding, saying no instead of numbing, waiting instead of grasping. These choices do not feel powerful in the moment, but over time, they reshape a life. This is why the psalm emphasizes patience. Not as delay, but as endurance. Endurance to continue doing what is right even when results are slow. Endurance to trust that unseen progress is still progress. Faith in this psalm is not measured by how quickly things change. It is measured by how steadily you remain aligned. Aligned with truth, aligned with wisdom, aligned with responsibility. And when faith moves like this, quietly, consistently, without spectacle, it creates something far more valuable than a breakthrough. It creates stability, and stability is the foundation upon which lasting prosperity is built. Most people underestimate how deeply impatience shapes their lives. Not loud impatience, not frustration that explodes, but the quieter kind, the kind that whispers, "This is taking too long." Debt intensifies that voice. It makes waiting feel dangerous. It convinces you that if change does not happen soon, something is wrong. But the psalm speaks directly into this tension. It does not treat patience as passivity. It presents patience as strength under control. Patience, in this context, is not about doing nothing. It is about refusing to abandon wisdom when pressure demands shortcuts. Because shortcuts often feel like progress, but they rarely lead to freedom. The psalm honors endurance, the ability to remain steady when results are slow, to continue choosing clarity over comfort, to trust the process even when there is no immediate evidence that it is working. This kind of patience reshapes the nervous system. It slows reactions. It widens perspective. When impatience fades, discernment returns. And discernment changes everything. You begin to see opportunities you would have missed in panic. You begin to recognize risks that once felt necessary. You begin to understand that stability grows quietly, not suddenly. The psalm reminds you that time is not your enemy. Fear makes time feel hostile. Wisdom teaches you to work with it. Faith, in this sense, is not measured by speed. It is measured by consistency, not by dramatic moments, but by daily decisions that accumulate meaning. This is why the psalm does not promise immediate relief. It promises presence. Presence that steadies you when impatience rises. Presence that anchors you when doubt appears. Presence that keeps you from abandoning the path you have begun. Endurance is not glamorous, but it is reliable. And reliability is what carries you out of debt, not wishful thinking. This psalm does not end with a command. It does not demand commitment. It does not pressure you to believe harder or try more. Instead, it leaves you with a choice, a quiet one. You can read it as a transaction, something you use when you want results. Or you can read it as an invitation, something you return to when you want alignment. The psalm will not chase you. It will not perform on demand, but it will remain available to those who approach it honestly. Not with desperation, but with openness. Not asking, "What can this give me?" but wondering, "What can this shape in me?" If you choose to read it this way, it will not remove responsibility from your life. It will strengthen you to carry it. It will not erase debt overnight. but it will dismantle the fear that keeps debt powerful. It will not promise wealth, but it will cultivate wisdom, the kind that sustains provision when it comes. And perhaps most importantly, it will remind you of something easy to forget. Your current situation is not your final definition. You are not the sum of your mistakes. You are not your balance sheets. You are not disqualified because of where you are now. The path forward does not begin with more money. It begins with steadiness, with patience, with discipline, with faith that moves, not to escape, but to rebuild. So if you return to this psalm, return without urgency. Read it slowly. Let it reflect rather than perform. And allow the change it brings to unfold in time. Not loudly, not dramatically, but faithfully. If this message spoke to you, if it helped you slow down, even just a little, you're welcome to stay. This channel is a quiet space for reflection, faith, and rebuilding. Not through quick answers, but through steady truth. If you'd like to continue this journey, you can subscribe and follow the channel. New messages are shared regularly for those who are waiting, rebuilding, and learning to move forward. With patience and clarity, there's no rush, no obligation, just an open door whenever you're ready to return. Thank you for being here.